The fire aboard the MV Express Pearl had already caused one of Sri Lanka's worst ever maritime disasters. Now it's sinking, which could bring another level of destruction. It was carrying almost 1,500 containers. Authorities are preparing for a potential spillage of the chemicals that didn't already burn up, as well as its hundreds of tons of fuel, and neighbouring India has sent 3 ships to help. The damage to people's livelihoods has already been done. The government's banned fishing along 80 kilometres of coastline. As many as 3 billion plastic pellets have already spilled out, and they're piling up on beaches. Hundreds of soldiers have been deployed to clean up.
Actually, this damage has caused many issues. It has damaged the whole ecosystem. It has damaged the ocean. It has living beings and fish and corals. All these have been destroyed.
The fire erupted on the 20th of May and was only extinguished after almost 2 weeks. Efforts to tow it into deeper waters failed as the ship became submerged. Authorities believe the fire was caused by an acid leak which the crew may have known about more than a week earlier. Sri Lankan police have questioned 3 officers from the boat as part of a criminal investigation, and the government has promised legal action against the ship's owners.
Signs of the 6-month conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region are as clear as rebel soldiers on the streets. Thousands have died as a result of fighting. But getting caught in the crossfire with government soldiers is just one risk faced by some 5 million civilians there in need of food assistance. The UN has warned the country is on the brink of famine. And troops working with the government from neighboring Eritrea, the UN says, bear particular blame.
How much of the current situation is due to conflict?
Well, most of it, really. I mean, it's the conflict that's destroyed farms and harvests and livelihoods and infrastructure. The conflict has wrought atrocities, mass killings, abductions, sexual violence. But some of the parties, I think, all the evidence is consistent with the worry that Eritrea, in particular, is using starvation as a weapon of war, which is a violation. It is a breach of humanitarian law.
In the 1980s, horrific images like these of starving children in Ethiopia and other parts of Africa prompted international outcry. But this time, humanitarian groups say the word and the images are not getting out.
There is both restrictions on information and then a massive campaign to basically question, undermine the information which is coming out from the region as well. And this is obviously a very difficult context for humanitarian actors to work in.
And for that, they say, the Ethiopian government and its Nobel Peace Prize-winning prime minister share some of the blame.
The military has ruled Ituri province for a month, but 4 weeks under an unprecedented state of siege wasn't enough to prevent this. One of the deadliest attacks to hit the region in at least 4 years. In displacement camps and villages near Boga and Tachabi, fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces unleashed a night of violence.
We were attacked by the rebels during the night. They killed my neighbours and burned them in their house before even arriving in my area. I ran and escaped, but they got here and they burned my children in my house.
The rebels abducted at least 25 survivors. Shelters and stores were burned to the ground. Now the area is marked with mass graves. Already displaced, the UN says the attacks have forced nearly 6,000 people to flee again, many with nothing but the clothes they were wearing. It's calling for more security, saying there's an urgent need to protect civilians. And the Congolese army claims it can provide that. With martial law extended until mid-June, the military governor of Ituri's visit to the area was all strength and determination.
The President of the Republic sent me with a clear message, which is to bring peace by all means. I have a special message for all of you. Please tell your brothers and sisters to come out peacefully from the bush. Otherwise, we will defeat them by force.
But the scale of the task can't be underestimated. Violence has plagued these eastern provinces for years, with more than 100 armed groups operating in the dense forests. Attacks on civilians have surged in the last 2 years, killing thousands of Congolese and displacing more than 5 million. The announcement of military rule, an attempt to stop that violence, was met with skepticism. Critics worried the military, already accused of rights violations and corruption, could exploit its new power. Now, 4 weeks in, activists are dismayed that the near-daily attacks have continued.
The military authorities are wasting time when they could be conducting the real operation against the rebels and tackling insecurity on the ground. Unfortunately, as the army is still in the office preparing their strategy, every day on the ground the enemy continues to massacre our populations.
But we start this news hour with breaking news out of Burkina Faso, where one of the biggest massacres in years has been committed. Armed men have killed around 100 civilians in the northern part of the country. The attack happened in the village of Solhan, close to Niger. The government says that homes at a market were burned to the ground. It's the first such attack on this scale since 2015. Al Jazeera's Nicholas Huck is monitoring those developments from Bamako in neighbouring Mali. Nick, what more do we know about what happened?
Well, it was in the early hours of this morning, Adrian, that a police patrol were driving through a market like this one, except instead of seeing animals and people sitting around, what they discovered was hundreds of bodies laying around. Women, children, men. At least 100 people officially are dead, but there could be more. They saw some of the survivors. And in the market where the animals were kept, well, that was completely burned to the ground. The huts were also burned to the ground. This is, Adrian, the worst attack in Burkina Faso since 2015, when we started to see attacks claimed by the armed group, the Islamic State, in the Greater Sahara. And in fact, Adrian, while no one has claimed responsibility for this attack, there has been in the eastern part of Burkina Faso, next to this village, other attacks. Just a couple of days ago.
New one need a not so out, General Majabu, Madame, DJ Maro, General Edelmu, and Madame Blubema. General Lenamakan, Chelsea account, Lena Atani, General Yingwe Bibiro, General Blubema, General Nanga Machida, Anashi, and Nipia would.
Monty got on Yamalu Monty that one Maluaro, below every Siana show. Type Nikan or Type Yamano. The Tolam Almachino, Yamalu Sabi or Josani Maradi, the Fatalani, the Fatalani Viola, Puni Tena, Puni Vima, one of your city by a pure chemist on Yamalu, Puni Nida, Pacani, Yamalu, Swango Puni Viva. Goro Marovono, say Shavana, Sabiro Tolamabona, Himalu at the Fatalani, Sabiro Puni Vivana, Di Tolaim Almachino, Sabio Atin Habiba,
Dima General Mana, Lena, Solution General, so it had a Tabi General, PTP, PTP, General, or Sivia, one, Sivia, Canary General, Lower, Pilusion General, Diana Kama General, the Lunari, Belumuk, ဘယ်လိုမျိုးထမ်းပိုးရမလဲစသည်ဖြစ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါတွေကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဘယ်လိုပြောမလဲသင်တန်းတက်ရတာပေါ့
An unofficial Uyghur tribunal led by lawyers and human rights experts in London. The objective? To determine whether China is guilty of a genocide against the Muslim minority.
We got two evidence hearings, one in June, one in September, 4 days each. I think some 70 witnesses overall, some of them witnesses of fact, some of them expert witnesses.
While the tribunal has no state backing, participants are hoping to draw international attention. China has not held back in condemning the hearings.
所谓的维吾尔特别法庭，既不合法，更不可信，只不过是少数人炮制的又一场反华闹剧，完全是盗用法庭的名号来搞反华的政治和舆论操弄，纯粹是对法律的亵渎。
Rights groups say that at least 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslims have been detained in the Xinjiang region. China denies that abuses are taking place and says its network of camps are there for re-education and vocational training purposes. The International Criminal Court announced in December it would not investigate because China, as a non-member, was outside of its jurisdiction. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice can only take a case that has been approved by the UN Security Council, over which China has veto power. The tribunal's launch comes a week ahead of a G7 summit in the UK, to be joined by US President Joe Biden, who has been urging fellow Western democracies to take a tougher line on China.
Well, hello, everyone. Really good to see you again. I'm Anne-Marie Green alongside Vladimir Duthier. Vlad, you are vaxxed and relaxed, but the president would like many more people to feel the way you do. And he's hoping to hit a major goal by the 4th of July.
Yeah, so, remember I did that piece for CBS this morning where I went all around New York City getting all the free stuff by, flashing my Vax card? I got, a free Nathan's hot dog. I got Junior's cheesecake. Yeah. I got, free snacks at the vitamin shop. So now President Biden is offering free beer, which is amazing. And I have some questions, Anne-Marie. I want to know, if I go down to my local, how much beer can I have? That is the question I want to know. I know you, what? Now. It's free. Gimme. It's so good when it touches your lips. I can't wait for people to take advantage of some of these offerings that we're going to talk about that are happening all over the country because, as you say, Anne-Marie, the rate of vaccinations has slowed. And there's some concern by the CDC that we're not going to hit the milestone that President Biden set for us by July 4th of having 200 million Americans vaccinated. Yeah. So the fight against the coronavirus is entering a new phase as the president ramps up these nationwide efforts, like I said, with incentives like free beer.
The Dutch colonizing land again, but this time they created it themselves. 5 years after digging up mud and sand from the bottom of the Netherlands' largest lake, these new islands can now be added to the country's map. Forest ranger Tim Creed saw how blubbery silt and clay turned into solid soil.
And it was actually dangerous. We went in the compartment with ropes. When somebody got stuck like this, my cipher went 2-3 times like this in. It's not that nice.
And now you can stand there.
Yeah, but you have to be cautious.
The Markerwadden Islands have been built in the Markermeer, which itself was created artificially more than a century ago by closing off the Southern Sea to protect the Dutch mainland from flooding. As a result, marine life nearly disappeared in the lake. The islands created out of silt are expected to restore the lake's ecosystem.
We interfered with our natural landscapes heavily in the Netherlands. It also brought us a lot of prosperity. But you see that main ecological structure of the Netherlands, well, it had some damage because of all these works. So this is a way to improve this again.
And it seems to be working. The islands are quickly turning into the country's largest bird sanctuary, with avocets, bearded reedings and even flamingos finding their way to the new land.
the most important lesson is that when we give the nature the opportunity to do their thing, it works. So we can destroy nature, but we can also restore it and make nature.
How Dutch engineers managed to turn mud into solid land that can carry thousands of kilos has fascinated researchers worldwide and remains a mystery today. Dozens of researchers are working on the islands to find answers to the most important question: why can I now stand here and not sink into the mud?
Fishermen who make a living of the lake have protested against the creation of the islands. They see their fishing grounds disappear quickly and refuse to believe the government's plan will revive marine life.
If they would have created one island as a breeding place for birds, that would have been fine, but they go further and want more and more. They are throwing sand everywhere, even at the most important breeding places for fish.
The government admits that more islands are planned in the near future, but insists that nevertheless fish stock will increase.
They have to be more patient, because at first they said you take 1,200 hectares out of the water, so that are hectares where we can't fish anymore. That's a point. But we said, well, after the islands are completed, you will see that there will be more fish.
After being criticized for spending 70 million euros on new land solely for birds, the government has decided to open one of the islands for tourists. In the future, they expect more than 100,000 visitors every year, potentially jeopardizing the same paradise they tried to create in the first place.
From oceans to forests and farmland, the world's ecosystems are being degraded and destroyed. And the UN Environment Programme says the situation is past the point where conservation alone can turn things around. At the moment, the equivalent of 1.6 Earths are needed to naturally supply what people are consuming. About 80% of the world's population live in countries running ecological deficits, and encroaching on animal habitats creates ideal conditions for pathogens like the one that's caused the global pandemic to cross to humans and spread. Or put another way, we are creating a big overlap area between animal and man for more coronaviruses. So what do we do? For starters, well, the UN Environment Programme wants a generational restoration to rehabilitate 1 billion hectares of land over the next decade. That's roughly the size of China. And the head of the UN Environment Programme, Inga Anderson, told Al Jazeera it can be done.
That billion hectares that we have overexploited, degraded through our human activity, we need to put it back into working order. Why? Because we still need to feed the world. We still need to ensure that we can live as humanity. And we can't do that if we continue to degrade the very land that sustains us. So the opportunity is, yes, we protect what has not yet been interfered with, but we put back into working landscape that which we have degraded. And it is so very doable. Each one of us know it from our back gardens. If we give or from the fields where we work, if we give nature half a chance, it will bounce back. It just needs a little helping hand. So this is an initiative where we are working with the finance sector. Obviously, we need to have farming on board, governments, science, and communities to move on restoration. But it will be essential for food and for climate.
It's the first step toward a global deal that could upend the world's business map. The G7 has set a minimum tax rate for huge multinational corporations, no matter where they are in the world.
Today, after years of discussion, G7 finance ministers have reached a historic agreement to reform the global tax system. First of all, what the agreement reached here today says at least 15%.
Finance ministers for the world's richest nations praised their accord, which specifically aimed to ensure digital giants such as Amazon, Facebook, and Google pay more in taxes.
I think we will end up with a tax system that will be much fairer and end effectively much tax competition.
Après 4 ans de combat, la France a eu gain de cause. Il y aura bien une taxation des gens du digital, il y aura bien une taxation minimale à l'impôt sur les sociétés pour éviter l'évasion et l'optimisation fiscale qui révoltent à juste titre nos compatriotes.
For decades, there has been a so-called race to the bottom, with countries competing to attract corporate giants with ultra-low tax rates. For example, Ireland has become a European business hub with its 12.5% base tax. The nation has pushed back against a higher rate, which could erase its competitive advantage. A 15% minimum rate would mark the biggest change to the global corporate tax system in a century, but it wouldn't be in force for a while. A deal must also be reached at the G20 in July, then at the OECD, with the aim of an agreement in October.
It's like something out of a dystopian novel. For several days now, Alex Chan has immersed himself in a world where history is being erased in real time. In April, Hong Kong's public broadcaster RTHK began deleting from its website and YouTube channel all its archives dating to before 2020.
See, I'm on the RTHK YouTube page for the show Hong Kong Connection. All reports related to the 2019 protests have been wiped.
Long admired for its editorial independence, RTHK is now under new management appointed by the government, actively reversing its journalists' work. Alex Chan is one of hundreds of Hong Kongers who are archiving RTHK content before it's gone for good, to keep documents of the 2019 protests alive.
I've archived a total of 20 documentaries. That's 10 hours of content. I think it was important to archive them because they're historical evidence. I witnessed what happened in Hong Kong in 2019, and I don't think that anybody should be allowed to delete the truth.
Among the content deleted by RTHK is this documentary that recounts the slow reaction of the Hong Kong police when an armed mob with suspected triad links attacked pro-democracy protesters and bystanders in July 2019. The producer of the report, Bao Choi, was arrested for her role in the production. She was found guilty of having lied to access a publicly available motor registry, the first conviction of its kind in Hong Kong. Despite her troubles with the law, the report has won her Best Documentary in Hong Kong's Press Freedom Awards, which RTHK declined to accept.
I am very proud to accept this award on behalf of the programme Hong Kong Connection.
Choi says her conviction marks a turning point for press freedom in Hong Kong.
I think the importance or the significance of this trial is general crackdown on press freedom in Hong Kong. Of course, we can predict or forecast the situation will become more worse and worse.
Emblematic of the authorities' tightening grip on the press was a large-scale police operation last August at the headquarters of Apple Daily, a popular openly anti-Beijing newspaper. The newsroom was searched, during which the paper's owner, the pro-democracy mogul Jimmy Lai, was marched handcuffed in front of staff. Lai is now in prison, convicted of multiple offences. These pictures were filmed by Apple Daily journalist Charlie Yik.
When I arrived, there were at least 200 police officers in the newsroom. What sticks in my mind is when they brought Jimmy Lai into his office, and they spent an hour rummaging through everything there.
Yik has been working at Apple Daily for 3 years. In that time, he has constantly seen colleagues censor themselves, and the paper's content has changed.
Numerous people make a newspaper, and if each of them self-censor even a little bit, in the end, the news we put out will no longer have the same meaning. Now, when a journalist is given some information, they will self-censor a bit. Then the same thing happens with the editor-in-chief, then the sub-editors, and sometimes the printers. You end up with the newspaper's content being completely different.
Hong Kong has seen a flowering of new media outlets in recent years, many of them pro-democracy, entirely funded by readers.
This is Stand News. We are one of the online media of Hong Kong.
Stand News came to prominence thanks to its coverage of the 2019 protests. It is now a respected force in Hong Kong media and increasingly a target for the authorities.
We all expect our company to be banned in a way in short future. Maybe they'll freeze our accounts, maybe they will say that we are an illegal organization. We don't know which way it is. I've been expecting maybe in sometimes I will be put into jail because of what I have done or I have written in the past.
Press freedom in Hong Kong deteriorates year on year. In 10 years, the city has gone from 34th to 80th in Reporters Without Borders press freedom standings.
After decades of exploring other planets, NASA is sending 2 missions to Venus, our closest yet perhaps most overlooked neighbour.
We hope these missions will further our understanding of how Earth evolved and why it's currently habitable when others in our solar system are not. Planetary science is critical in answering key questions that we have as humans, like, are we alone? What implications beyond our solar system could these 2 missions have?
The first mission, Da Vinci Plus, will examine Venus's atmosphere and seek to determine whether the planet ever had an ocean. The second mission, Veritas, will explore Venus's geological history. The robotic missions, which have been awarded $500 million in funding, are due to launch between 2028 and 2030.
In a quiet Mexican village, as the elders play dominoes, we're waiting to meet a refugee. Candelario fled here to Los Halcones in the state of Michoacan when the war between rival criminal groups overtook his village, Los Cuchis. He's 71 years old and suddenly homeless.
At my age, what can I do? My only future is to work the land that I have. And apart from that, I don't know. Beg for money because I have no other option.
Every week he goes back to Los Cuchis to check on his land. We went with him this time, escorted by a local vigilante group, the only safe-ish way to travel there. Candelario showed us where he'd lived since he was 4 and where he buried his dad.
Right here is my father. Here is the flowers. He only recently died. He wanted to be buried here. And here I have him.
I asked him how it felt to have to leave his father's grave.
Sad, humiliated, there's no words to explain it. Sometimes I can't even come to bring a wreath. Whatever, that's life, and we have to accept it.
People across this region are living the same nightmare. The struggle between gangs who kill and often extort has left many villages empty. The initials of Cartel Jalisco New Generation. El Limoncito is another. On the wall of this house, the initials of the Jalisco New Generation cartel among the bullet holes. We went inside. See, among the broken glass on the floor, there's also bullet casings here. It's pretty unnerving, actually, being in this house, in this village in which there's no one else but us. Shortly after, we heard gunfire close by. We ran, just like everyone else has done. Many have run all the way to the northern border, trying to get out of the country altogether and find asylum in the United States. That's where we found Leticia and her family, sleeping in this donated tent for the last 5 nights. 2 of her brothers had already been killed. Then a gang tried to get her daughter to deal drugs for them. Leticia filmed the last call they made to her.
Or you join us, or I'll kill you.
The whole family fled, including her disabled father and 1-year-old granddaughter, with nothing but the clothes on their backs.
We went quickly, crouched down in the car so that they wouldn't see us, because they have people everywhere.
Now they're betting everything on the slim chance of the US taking them in. We met many others in the same situation. All of them said they couldn't go back.